Good evening, everyone. Thank you, and I'm sorry we're just a couple minutes late. Since 6 p.m. this evening, we have been in closed session for purposes of appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district, or legal counsel for the district, sale or purchase of securities, investments, or investment contracts, setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the district, bless you, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular district has been filed or pending before a court or administrative tribunal, and finally, student disciplinary cases. So with that, I would entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to come out of closed session. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And my computer just went to sleep. As always, we want to welcome you. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everyone on the World Wide Web that's watching, the 3 people. We still appreciate you watching. And our mission, our all-important mission that our students and staff live by, the district staff live by every day, to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. And with that, I will ask Ms. Bell for a roll call, please.
Student Ambassador present, Austin Hansen. Board members present, Kristen Fitzgerald, Susan Price, Terry Fielden, Jackie Romberg, Donna Wanke, Mike Yench, and Susan Crotty.
Thank you. And we're at the good news section of our evening.
We have some great news. Just as a follow-up from a presentation that the Board of Education received at a previous meeting from our art teacher at Mill Street and Highlands. Our team is back safe from Washington, D.C. They had an amazing trip to the Capitol building, to the White House. A lot of experiences along the way, an opportunity to meet with Representative Foster, staff from Senator Durbin's office, Representative Roscom's office, tours of various parts of the Capitol and tunnels from offices to places throughout the Capitol, opportunity to be with the President and to meet the President. It was a fantastic trip. They have captured a lot of their trip, as you would imagine, in a movie. And we've seen a trailer, and it's just fantastic. It actually, I think Ms. Ryan said it gave her the goosebumps, and dare I say, it was close to shedding a tear. It was just moving. It was a great experience for our kids. So they had a wonderful trip. They had a wonderful time. We look forward to maybe sharing with you what they produce. The kids that had the opportunity to go on the trip were so concerned about ensuring that all of the kids that were involved in the project had an opportunity to be celebrated too, that they really wanted to capture everything. So they're working on producing a movie to share that with all of the kids, so it's like they were there too. So it's a great experience, a great opportunity for our kids. So that's great news.
Awesome. Sorry I got all involved listening to that. And this portion of our meeting is public comment. And those that aren't familiar with this, there were slips of paper outside. If you'd like to speak to the board and you're representing a group, you would have 5 minutes. And if you're representing yourself, 3 minutes. I don't have any slips of paper, but is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak in public comment? No. Okie doke. Well, that's okay. We're still glad you're here. Student Ambassadors Report. We're going to start with Austin Hansen. And I have to mention one thing to you. I had heard from, I think, 6 different people, 6 different teachers, staff, people, administrators at North High School, that the all-school assembly, which I'm sure you're going to speak about, you could not hear a pin drop in the room. What a rock star that guy was. So anyhow, I don't want to steal your thunder. Pretty amazing.
I was going to save that part to the end, but I'm going to actually just go right into it. Yes, Chris Herron came and spoke to our school February 19th, a couple weeks ago, and I've mentioned to you guys this many times. I was part of the pilot group that went and saw him at Downers Grove North to see if this was a good investment for our school, and I saw the community portion, and it was so impactful in to the group of students that went there with the community, and that we were very impressed, and we said, we recommended that we get him. And I didn't want to set my expectations too high because I didn't see him speak in front of students, especially because he just blew my expectations away in front of the community. But he did it again. He came and spoke in front of our entire school. And I don't think I've ever heard 3,000 some kids in an assembly like this. It was dead silent the entire time. Even after the thing ended, walking out, there was not anyone. No one was talking. We just went right to our classes.
Right?
Yeah, it hit people in so many different ways. There's so many different lessons to be learned from his story, with drugs, with alcohol, with self-harm, with confidence and being yourself. And there's everyone, regardless of what you were, if you have it. I mean, it's hard to really describe to people. And so, that was amazing. After the assembly, we actually had the opportunity to go back to our second period class, and we had about 10 to 15 minutes to kind of reflect as a class on what we just heard and what we just took in. Oh, before that, actually, after his presentation, he opened it for question and answer from the entire school. And there were some really brave kids that came up and took the mic and shared their own testimonials of things that, it took a lot of guts on their part to express some of these concerns and experiences they've had with these different things. And so I give people a lot of credit on that. And like I said, walking out of it, and one person was, everyone was dead silent. And I guess there's like a sense of unity. Our class, our entire school, just kind of, it was really eye-opening to know that everyone has issues and problems that they're dealing with, and that something as simple as a hello or a pat on the back can go such a long way in someone's life. So then we went back to our classrooms, and again, being in a smaller group, it just went on and on and on, all the different experiences that people had, either with themselves, a friend, a family member. It was really emotional, to say the least.
Austin, can you just for a second talk about who this gentleman is that was so impactful for folks that
yes, that's probably
don't
important.
Know, we all know because you've kept us up to speed.
Yeah. So Chris Heron is he's a individual from So he grew up in a town in Boston that's pretty similar to Naperville. Same kind of income level and kind of stuff like that. And he grew up in high school, and according to his story, all he ever did was drink and smoke, and that's all he did. That's all his friends ever did. And when people would come into his school to lecture about drugs and alcohol, they would he'd kind of just shove it off the shoulder and not think much of it. And he said this was a theme throughout his story, is he wished he could go back. That's the one thing he wishes he could do. Every single time is he wishes that he could go back to high school and actually listen to these people. But he said it in a more, I don't know how to explain it. It was just in such a different way. He later went on. He was incredibly great at basketball, almost superhuman great at basketball, especially in high school. And so he went to Boston College on a scholarship for basketball. After that, he went into he had his first drug test and failed it, and then he ended up going to a different college to play. He ended up playing for the Boston Celtics and became he was in Sports Illustrated, very great athlete. And he just shared a story of how, he cycled down a very downward spiral.
But kids can really relate.
It's on
he's
Netflix too. It's called Unguarded. It's a documentary too on Netflix. So it's not the same. I've seen it, but it is similar. It tells his story, and but it's nothing like him in person and seeing your classmates right next to you with their mouth wide open. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But you can go over the rest. But that was just amazing.
On a lighter note, last Thursday, our programming team competed against other Chicagoland schools in the 20th annual Divide programming competition. 2 of the 4 teams competed and placed first and second in the competition, which was really cool. The Science Olympiad team came in second place in regional competitions this Saturday. The NNHS BPA team went to state, and we had a first place winner in integrated office applications, and one other individual placed top 3 in project management. Next week, if I had a drum, I'd do the drum roll for you, is Spring Week. It's our turnabout dance. I still cannot share with you the theme because our school has not released it yet, and so you won't find out till after the fact. I'm sorry. But that is next week. Air Band is coming up this Thursday, or not this Thursday, the following Thursday, a week from Thursday, the 13th. And this is the second largest event at Naperville North High School, and it's second to graduation. So it's a pretty big deal at our school.
Are you competing?
I am not, no. I'll actually be out of town. But
They practice. I mean, there's a lot of.
I have a lot of friends that do
Well,
it,
there's
and
they've been working on
they
a
take
lot
it
of-
very seriously, their competition or their practices. And
takes
I mean, it's even more competitive than sports. I think it's crazy, but that's awesome. And then again, spring is next Saturday, a week from this Saturday. It's the 15th, and again, the theme has not been unveiled, so I can't unveil it here for the
Well,
World
we'll
Wide
wait.
Web to hear.
We will
Yeah.
be patient.
Yeah,
Thank
cool.
you so
Yep,
much,
no
as
problem.
always. Stephen was not able to be with us this evening. And next we'll get to Superintendent Staff School Report.
Great. Our report tonight actually comes to you from Ranch View School, and I think the majority of our large audience is here in support of our principal, Sue Solness, who will be presenting on behalf of her staff. So, Sue, as I introduce you, come on up and get set up here. One of the things that the board has asked is that annually we present to the Board of Education school improvement plans for each of our schools. And one of your required actions is approval of those school improvement plans. But the board had requested an opportunity to really learn a little bit more about what's happening in the schools, how the schools are putting these plans into action and giving them life. And so we're going to begin a process of bringing forward a school during our work session board meetings, not every month, but as often as we can fit into the schedule, a principal to just give you a brief overview of the school improvement work that they do in their school and to engage you in conversation about their school. So our fearless volunteer, first volunteer, going to kick this process off for us is our principal from Ranch View Elementary School, Sue Solness. Sue?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share our process and the Rising Star program with you at Ranch View. As you can see on the screen, we are the Ranch View Rangers, and we hope that after this presentation you will see how the Rising Star process is helping us meet our motto of being the Point Rider Rangers, moving ahead of the herd. So what you see in front of you is a little bit of a different format than a PowerPoint. This is called an ebook. So we're presenting in a format that highlights one of the Rising Star indicators that we have chosen this year to work on with our students and staff. So we thought, what a better way to share our process than through the learning that we've done this year. So this is an ebook called Creative Book Builder that our students and our children have used this year. So we're going to start. You can see it's got the chapters down the side. We're going to take you through each of our indicators and share a little bit about the process with you. Embedded within this CBB, Creative Book Builder, we have other applications that our kids have worked on, and we hope you enjoy. So we're going to start with We Are the Rangers. And this is me in digital form explaining our introduction, if it works.
We are the Rangers. Our Rising Star plan reflects our goal to move ahead of the herd, to innovate, collaborate, and educate to the highest professional level so that all students achieve to their greatest potential and enjoy a successful journey towards lifelong learning. We begin with our process.
That's called a telegami, and it's something that our kids really enjoy using to demonstrate their learning. So the process. Our process started this summer at our data spa, where our 12-member team came together to look at our student achievement data. We looked at standardized assessment, district data, and our school climate data. We also learned from district staff the Rising Star model at that point and began the process of assessing all of the indicators of best practice to see where they aligned with what we needed to do at Ranch View School. So you can see each of our members is assigned a task to keep our committee working and moving forward, and some of them are listed there at the bottom. As I turn the page, you'll see some more at the top. So at that first meeting, we kind of got a start, and then throughout the fall, the early fall, we started the process of really vetting those indicators of best practice against the district's standards of practice and the Ranch View work that we've been doing for the past 3 years, and that's what these show you here. So you can see for the past 3 years at Ranch View, under our acronym of Rangers, we've been working on quite a few initiatives to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students. We wanted to make sure that the Rising Star indicators aligned with our work and the work that's important to the district as well. And again, we wanted teachers to understand that we weren't imposing new things on their practice, but we were aligning what was important to both the district and the building in meeting needs of our kids. So that took us about the first couple months of school to vet those 104 best practice indicators and align them to where we needed to be at Ranchview. By October, we had selected our indicators. We had created the action tasks that go with those indicators. We presented to our staff and parents, and from that point on, we've been working to complete those action steps and monitor our progress in working on those. So the indicators that we ended up with for Ranchview School fall under 3 categories. The first one talks about differentiation and instruction and using assessment to drive what teachers do. Our second indicator talks about our culture and being culturally responsive and meeting the needs of our students, not only academically, but socially and emotionally. And our third indicator is the technology integration. So I'm going to take each one of those and share a little bit about some of the action steps that we've determined to go with them. So the first indicator talks about being responsive through data-driven decision-making and instruction. And we've listed here, you can see at the bottom, I'm not going to read that for you, but when that indicator is fully met, that is our goal, that all of our students will be given the instruction that they need to succeed. So one of the tasks is to make sure that our teachers are taking ownership of that process. So we use what's called a data review process, and we want that to be embedded in teachers' weekly planning as they work to create their lessons and meet the needs of students. And so what that looks like, and this is a document that they use, it's a cycle of instruction using data. So teachers teach a unit of instruction. They identify students that were not proficient in meeting that standard. They use this document to lay all those student names out. They analyze what the problem would have been in students not achieving that goal. They come up with an intervention plan. They teach that intervention plan for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. They reassess to make sure that all students met the target. And so we want that to be a normal part of teachers' practice. And so that's our first indicator action step. Our second has to do with something we're very proud of at Ranchview, where we have a push and support model. So all of our special ed teachers, our ELL teachers, our reading specialists push into the classroom and co-teach with the regular ed teachers. That way our students are not missing core curriculum, they're not being pulled out. So here's a few teachers talking about what that means to them.
Hi, I'm Alex Morrow. I'm a second grade teacher at Ranchview School.
Hello, I'm Kathy Hildeman. I'm a teaching assistant in Alex's class.
And I'm Debbie Joyce. I'm the reading specialist.
And we want to tell you how we use co-teaching to make sure all of our kids are successful in reading.
All students' needs are met based on common goals and targets. As we team plan, we discuss formative assessments and use them to drive our instruction.
And I get a chance to learn from the reading specialist as she will teach lessons from time to time. Students are never taken out of the classroom, and therefore they never miss core instruction and they feel like they're a part of the group.
And as part of the support team, I hear the mini lessons daily, so I'm able to use them to support our targets and use the same language that Alex uses in my small group during workshop.
And the idea is that these are all of our kids, and as a team, we work together to be responsible for each of their success.
So we've taken some data on that first indicator. We've taken grade level data and we've looked at our school data. So this is a sample of what the grade level data looks like. So again, you can see that during one of the cycles in second grade, they focused on word study or developmental spelling. After the initial instructions, 70% of their students met proficiency marks, but 24 students did not. So they took them through the data cycle, and at the end of that intervention plan, 93% of the students were at the proficiency level. And there's just some more data from a third grade cycle talking about math facts, where they moved 67% proficiency to 100% proficiency after the cycle was implemented. We also take a look at our school-wide data, so you have some information from our performance series assessment, moving from fall to winter. And you can see that we have moved students from the below average to the average or above average range, and we did exceed the 50% marker for the students who showed gains from fall to winter. So our next steps are just to continue what we're doing because we think it's working pretty well. Our data is showing that. Our second indicator has to do with being culturally responsive, and we know that's a very big initiative in the district. It's also very important at Ranchview because almost 40% of our students at Ranchview are of East Indian or Asian descent. So we are quite a diverse population. We are blessed to have that, but we wanted to celebrate that and make sure that our teachers were being responsive to our population. So one of our highlights of our action steps was to make sure that we devoted some staff development to a shared understanding of what it means to be culturally responsive. And we have a couple teachers talking about that.
Fourth grade, our philosophy about cultural diversity focuses on open-mindedly acknowledging that differences do exist, educating about those differences, and accepting those differences through visual displays and literature.
That was Mr. Jerry J. He's a fourth grade teacher, and we also have a first grade teacher, Jean.
At Ranchview, we believe it is no longer enough to provide a safe and encouraging learning community for our students. We as educators must be culturally responsive. We have learned that we must embrace the cultural knowledge, personal experiences, and performance styles of all our students in order to build those meaningful bridges between our home and school. Culturally responsive teaching enriches classroom experiences and keeps our students engaged.
That was Janine Crockett. I misspoke her name, and she'll kill me if I don't say it right. So, Janine, that was for you. One of the other tasks under this best practice indicator had to do with an issue that we are having during our lunches. As I said, we have a very diverse population of students who often bring their lunches from home. And we were noticing that we had several students who were actually hiding their lunches from other students, or they were being teased because of the types of lunches they were bringing from home. So we decided to tackle that by partnering with Sodexo to have some special lunches at our school. And this shows a picture of that. One was called Everybody Cooks Rice, or Everybody Eats Rice, and the second one we had just last week was called Everybody Eats Noodles. And so as Sodexo brought in and cooked online to order for the kids, I read a shared book over the large screen to them that highlighted the diversity of our building, but yet the commonality that we all, even though we eat things that are different, they have the same components. And so we have some first graders who are going to share with you their thoughts on this, and this is not scripted. They came up with this on their own.
So girls and boys, tell me a little bit about diversity and why we celebrate that at Ranchview School.
Hello, my name is Anai, and our lunches are trying to teach us that everybody eats different foods, and that's okay.
My name is Angela. Everyone is different on the outside, but on the inside, we all care about each other.
My name is Vanilla. It doesn't matter if you're from a different country. It just matters who you are.
Hello, my name is Via, and it's okay that we are all different.
So that's the first grade perspective on diversity at Ranchview. So the data that we've collected so far is more quantitative than qualitative, or more qualitative, I should say, than quantitative. We've done 18 hours of professional development so far in our building related to culturally responsive practices. I feel like our staff is moving from the early stages of that teaching pedagogy to the developmental stage where we understand the importance of it, we understand what it means, and now we're starting to implement some of those practices in our teaching. And so our next steps are to get our students and parents more involved in that initiative, and to we're going to do some instructional rounds in our building where teachers walk into each other's classrooms. They take evidence or look for evidence of culturally responsive teaching practices. Then they get together and collaborate and talk about what they've seen so that we can build on each other's experiences. So that's our second indicator. Our last one is what you're seeing before you, evidence of the integration of transformational technology. We are blessed to have a lot of technology in our building. We need more, and we're going to ask for more, Tim, Roger. But we want to make sure that our teachers are using that technology to enhance instruction. We also want to make sure that our students are using technology to demonstrate their understanding. So one of the indicators that we're working on, one of the action steps, is to make sure that we use the teacher leaders within our building to co-teach, because we are working on that co-teaching model in our school, to make sure they're sharing their expertise and building teachers' rapport and teachers' knowledge of how to use technology. So there's a picture of our LRC director working with students. She actually teaches a new app a week to all the students. They then take that back to their classroom. They're very excited about it. The teachers get engaged in it, and it just builds that excitement for using new technology. We are blessed to have a wonderful TIS in our building, Colleen Cannon-Rufo. She comes to our school, and she does some classroom co-teaching, and this is a video of that.
Brain was closest. Here's what I'm going to show you. The hardest thing seems to be those angles. How do we draw an angle? A lot of people try and draw the angle as another line segment, but it's not, is it?
So she was doing one of the Lego Mindstorms robot lessons, and I happened to interview a mom, and that's what you're going to see next, and she happened to actually talk about that lesson and her daughter's experience with it.
Kirsten Haskell, and I have a 4th grade student here at Rangeview, and I have been very impressed with the math curriculum here at Rangeview with their technology. I watched my daughter do a Probot presentation, and she was trying to figure out how to make an equilateral triangle, and through trial and error she really was able to figure out what mistakes she was making to actually complete it, and then she visually had a representation of it, and it just really solidified her understanding of that math curriculum that she was working on.
So that was our first task, is making sure that our teachers are comfortable with technology and they know how to use it effectively in their classroom. The second task we are working on is making sure then that our students are taking the initiative to actually use the technology that they're learning. We promote collaboration. We have a buddy system where our older kids teach our younger kids in the younger grades how to use some applications. We do a lot of collaborative working, making sure we're meeting that collaborative worker descriptor. We also ask that students are using technology to explain their thinking. So we have, and that meets the Common Core state standards for presentation, for writing, for speaking and listening, so it hits a lot of the Common Core standards that we're trying to achieve. We're going to show you 3 examples of some of the applications that our kids have used this year. The first one's called Explain Everything. It's like an interactive whiteboard. So our kids use it a lot in math to show or demonstrate how to solve a problem.
We start out with 256 plus 192 because Nora got 192 more beads when she already had 256.
So he had written that story problem on the whiteboard and then solved it for his friend. Another telegami that you saw at the beginning of the presentation. This was a telegami done by our PI students. For our younger students, we just finished our One Book, One School initiative where we all read a book called Kenny and the Dragon. And each day as we read a chapter, we discussed key vocabulary words, and they were quite challenging. So our PI students made the telegamis to help our kids understand the vocabulary words in the book.
Kenny and the Dragon on page 101, the text says astride. Astride means to have a leg on each side of something, such as when riding a noble steed.
He chose to use that English accent to add engagement. And then the last example is a very quick one, so you have to listen quickly, but this is an example of what my TIS calls app smashing, where children have actually used 2 applications to present their information. This is the presentation on Lewis and Clark, so they've used something called PicCollage and iMovie together.
The story of Lewis and Clark.
And that's it. Told you it was quick. And then I just have one more interview with a parent who's talking about how her kids come home excited about the new apps that they're learning.
I'm Sarah Cardwell. I have a 3rd grader and a 5th grader here at Rangeview. And I have to say I'm amazed at the amount of technology that they're using at Rangeview and how my kids are coming home dying to do their apps that they've learned at school. It's greatly improved their mathematics skills, especially just the multiplication skills and things like that. It's great. Thank you.
So the data that we've collected around this indicator represents the work that our teacher leaders have done. You can see that our LRC director here has worked with almost 80% of our staff and has co-taught 64 lessons so far in the classroom, and she's just one of our teacher leaders who have been doing that for our staff. We've had classroom teachers present at our institutes related to the technology they're using in their classrooms. We've had grade levels have release time with our TIS to work on such projects as e-portfolios that some of our 4th graders will be using to do their own self-conferences during spring conferences, and how to access Canvas sites and utilize those as a communication tool for parents. We've also conducted a focus walk recently. He's wanted to see, even though we have all of this hardware and all of this software, are we really using it? So as we walked around the building, taking data during this one day, we collected evidence that showed that our teachers were actually using technology 68% of the time that we were walking around the building to enhance instruction, and that our students were using or accessing technology at least 40% of the time that we were walking through the building. So those are very high percentages of use of technology in our building. And when students were using technology, what we were excited about, down at the bottom, they were using technology to learn from or to create with, not just learning about how to use an app. So those higher level uses of technology. So in conclusion, we're excited at Rangeview about the work that we're doing. We think this Rising Star process has helped move us forward. We think it has also helped us be a very successful school, and our indicators do align with the 3 top indicators of what successful schools do, and so we feel like we're right on track. There are some people in the back of the room that I want to thank, and their names are up here. So it took quite a village to put this together, but I hope you can see that the love that went into this is what we see every day at Rangeview. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing. We have one more thing to show you. And this kind of summarizes what the Rising Star process has done for us at Rangeview and what we're hoping to achieve. This is called an iMovie.
Sue, can I ask you to introduce who's here from Ranchview? We
Sure.
love to put names and faces.
Sure.
Thank you. I know. And they maybe can stand up like we ask our students to do.
Sure, they absolutely can stand up.
Right?
Stand, please. Why don't you introduce yourselves? We'll start with our TIS, Colleen.
I'm Colleen Cannon-Rufo. I'm the Technology Integration Specialist.
I'm Kristen Cummings. I'm the Assistant Principal.
I'm Laura Meath. I'm a 3rd grade teacher.
Virginia Jamnicki. I'm a Reading Specialist.
Michael Buckley, Learning Support Coach.
Linda Mullins, Lead Coordinator, but Sue is my mentor, and obviously I couldn't have a better one.
Oh. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll open it up to questions. Any board questions? Amazing. Amazing.
Thank you. It was fun to put together.
So when we first studied all the school improvement plans, we got like a white piece of paper that had the ranch view, and it's amazing to see it all come to life in a, even looking at the presentation ahead of time, just what you did here tonight is so much more expressive of all that you've been able to do. So thank you for putting that presentation together, and it really brings it to life for all of us. I was so excited to see your numbers about your interventions and how when you pulled the students out, what you did was successful.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that process. And you did a little in the presentation,
Sure.
but in terms of how it looks in terms of the push-in and the collaboration and continuing to cover new material, but still catching them up for where they need to go and making sure everybody else keeps going ahead. How does that
Right.
work, and what kinds of things are you doing that you find really successful that you want to share?
Sure. Well, it hasn't been an overnight process. It's taken about 3 years to get where we're at, focusing on this and really making it work with our schedule and understanding what co-teaching means. And we did work with a woman called Cindy Harris, who was brought in by the district to help us with the data review cycle model.
Okay.
So we incorporated that. Michael, our learning support coach, and I went through that training and then brought that back to the staff. But basically, it is how I described it, that we have set aside time during our day for our support staff and our teachers to co-plan, which is key. They do that during their planning time. They do that after school. We get substitutes sometimes for them to be able to have that time to collaborate. We look at data as a continual model. We had worked all last year on something called the 7 strategies of assessment and understanding how to use formative assessments to drive our instruction. So our teachers are very used to using formative assessments, taking those checks on how students are doing. So they use that model. They come together. They look at the numbers of kids who aren't making the achievement that we want them to make, and then they have critical conversations about the instructional strategies that they need to put in place in order to meet their needs, and then they do it. And then they come back and we take evidence that they've actually made that gap. And it's a struggle because our teachers teach 6 subjects a day. And so as the rest of the class is moving on, they have to find time through those interventions and that small group instruction and working together as a team to pull those students for that small group work. And it's difficult, but they are awesome at it and they do a wonderful job in our data. You know, we made AYP this year. We're a high achieving school. It's working. It's a model that really works.
Thanks for sharing about it.
Susan? Kudos to you and your team. It's really
you.
It is really impressive, and you've certainly set the bar very high for other schools. And
well, my colleagues are just as creative as I am. They'll blow you away.
And I know
as well.
this is not the first time that you volunteered to go first in some district-wide, or gotten to go first. I don't know if volunteers are.
I was given the opportunity.
Yes. Yes. And I think you approach everything with given the opportunity. I mean, I think that that's one of the things that sets you apart. But, you know, I thought it was really interesting. When I think back over the last decade in this district, I hear all these things about this pull-out and that pull-out and this pull-out program. And it's the first time I've heard the word push in. And if it's working so well for you, my question for you more than just you at your one school, for Dan, is this going to, you know, could something, this is just an example, considered best practice? How do you take the things that are successful at one school and share them and put them to work at another school without feeling like you're shoving somebody else's idea down another school's throat?
Okay, I can speak to that through how we've implemented our district leadership team meetings. Through the focus of the district leadership team meeting that Kane orchestrates for us as a district is to bring our principals together for opportunities such as peer review and opportunities for collaboration on what's working in their school so that they can share those practices and that information so that then schools can learn from each other and go back and apply what is working and see how it may be relevant for their sites and schools. That's, I think, the most rewarding part of what I've seen through the school improvement process this year is that opportunity for that principal collaboration about just what is happening in their schools.
And I know that Jen is working with our reading specialist teachers, our learning support coaches, on what co-teaching looks like and how their roles are evolving to do more of that. And so that's coming. It's not just something that we're doing at Ranchview. I think other schools are doing it in bits and pieces. We're a little bit ahead of the herd trying to push that envelope a little bit in our building because we see that it's working. We had the need to meet some students who traditionally weren't getting to.
But I think that's an important point that Sue's brought up. I focused on the principles, but it is an articulated effort of layers of leadership that exists within our building and throughout our district to be able to come together to do that collaboration and take practices back to their schools.
So it looks like or feels like everything's so aligned, and that doesn't happen by accident. How, like you're a teacher by training, how do you all of a sudden learn to be a project management specialist? How does that skill set all of a sudden translate to this new skills where all of a sudden, it's no longer about teaching, it's about Common Core, all these different things. How are you able to keep up and, read those 6 books I saw?
It's a group effort. I work with a wonderful group of people who are very smart and who do their homework, and we work together and we provide some real critical professional development with the support of, the leaders here at PSAC. But it takes time and training and a lot of conversations and taking a risk. And I think our staff excels at taking a risk. They're not afraid to try something new. They want to do things that are innovative and what's best for kids. So it's just a matter of kind of doing it, like the Nike commercial says. You just try it and see how it goes.
First of all, thank you so much. It was wonderfully presented and very inspiring. And
So I'm very much of a numbers person. So looking at your data that Kristen pointed out, so you have the 6-week intervention data after that, and so I see that like in second grade, for your word study you were at 93%, and in third grade with the math you were at 100%. So then will that 7% have another 6-week intervention then,
Yes.
or okay?
Yes.
So they're in 6-week cycles.
Yes. So we come together, myself and Kristen and Michael, our learning support coach, push into the team meetings after school, and we help facilitate the conversation and making sure that everyone is on track and the process continues. So we then look at that data and say, okay, great, you made 93%, but we still have these 7% or maybe 4 kids who aren't there. What are we going to do with them? And that's the process. So they've got 3 data cycles going at the same time, plus they're teaching the regular curriculum. So
And those kids have to keep up with the regular curriculum as well. So that's
But that's why the push and support model is so important, because we're not pulling them out. They're still hearing the core instruction, but they may be sitting at the back table with an assistant or the reading specialist or the special education teacher, so that instruction is retaught, it's remodified so that they can gain access to it. But it's a continual process, and we very much try to leave no child behind. But it's work.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions? Yes.
I thought that was awesome.
Thank you.
I was really entertained over here.
Great.
I just had one question for you, and it's about one of the things that you did.
Yes.
How did you create the ebook again? Was that an app, or is that?
It's an app called Creative Book Builder.
Creative Book Builder.
Oh, I'm not on the screen anymore. It's called CBB.
CBB.
It's awesome.
Awesome.
Kids love it, and our first graders can use it.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
that's
we
the
need
crazy
to go back
thing.
to first grade.
Yeah.
Is what,
I didn't know every single thing was new to me. Those apps, those were really cool. So.
Well, great. I'm
Yeah.
glad you learned something
Thank you.
today. Sure.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? Sue, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you,
job.
Thank
all
you,
Ranchview.
Ranchview staff.
Thank you. It was amazing. Amazing.
Thank you for being here to support your principal in the process. Thanks for all your work at the school, too.
Awesome. I do not have a report this evening. Does any of the board members have a report this evening? Do any of the board members, sorry. And we will then move to the consent agenda, please. A motion.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the consent agenda, and I guess we'll take a roll call.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Wonky.
Yes.
Fielden.
Yes.
Romberg.
Yes.
Yench.
Aye.
Crotty.
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. And we have quite a long list. It's a big discussion without action night. So that's good news in some ways, but these will all turn into action items as well. And a number of board policies, and I will let our superintendent kind of talk about the process that we're.
Well, we're going to start with a proposed Board of Education meeting calendar for next year. So that'll be the first item.
Right.
And so you have that provided for you in board docs.
Right.
It is essentially what it does is it follows the first and third Monday of every month. We only have one scheduled in July, 2 in every other month. You'll note on some certain dates with asterisks, those are on Tuesdays that follow a holiday on Monday. There has been some question asked about 2 meetings in August. We have had 2 meetings in each of the last 2 Augusts. One for closed session. The last year we added a special session. My recommendation is that we schedule it. It's easier to pull off the schedule than maybe coordinate schedules if we don't have business to discuss. It's also a time that we hire, last-minute hiring for our school district, so that would help facilitate that process as well. But I'll take any questions. It's really for the board for conversation about setting your schedule for next school year.
Questions, comments? Okey-doke. And we will vote on this at our next meeting. And everyone can get those dates on their calendars, which is really helpful. I'm sorry I got all ahead of myself. I knew there were so many without actions. The next item, if there aren't any questions on that, are high school courses for 2015-2016.
As I make a couple of brief comments, I'll invite our Director of Curriculum, Jane Willard, Assistant Principals for Curriculum at each of our high schools, Jeff Howard and Jackie Thornton, to come forward. 8.02 and 8.03 are going to be combined in one presentation. You noted that the presentation is actually listed under both agenda items, so that whichever one you want to be on, you don't have to go searching for it. But these are annual presentations for high school courses. Note these will be for 2015-16. for the courses, but then the resources are for 14, 15. They're separated in terms of for looking ahead to next week for our next board meeting for action, because they are two separate items, but it's the same team that will be presenting both. So we'll just put them together in one presentation with a transition slide in the middle. So Jane, I'll turn it over to you.
Man, good evening. Our presentation may not be as slick as the one you just received, but we will try our best. I'm here tonight with Jackie and Jeff, and we're here to recommend the new high school courses, our title changes, and also our credit changes for the 2015-16 implementation for Board of Education approval. Tonight we're recommending two courses, our first course being Algebra and Geometry Applications, and also Capstone in Music Inquiry and Disciplinary Literacy. Both schools worked collaboratively as they recommended these new courses for approval. Algebra and Geometry Applications is a course designed for students identified that of needing more support in the special education department. This course will include basic algebra and geometry concepts that will prepare students for community college coursework after graduation. This course completes a 4-year pathway of supported math work. The Capstone in Music Inquiry and Disciplinary Literacy is designed to give students the opportunity to participate in a self-directed inquiry in any aspect of music. Students will engage in the deep research and inquiry around a strand of music, and then will actually produce a final thesis product that will be presented to teachers, parents, and also peers. The top 3 capstone projects will be presented to the music department for formal evaluation. These teachers will work collaboratively this summer, if approved, to create this curriculum for the 15-16 implementation. The next slide communicates the course title changes. These new course titles clearly can represent the content. They better represent the content than the existing course titles. If you notice, the discrete math with statistics is now broken into 2 separate courses, discrete math or statistics. And what this allows is for students actually to take in sequence both courses, or they can take them as standalone courses, which right now they're not doing. This next slide is only credit changes only. If you look at the digital publishing and design, previously it was CTE credit. Now students can either choose a CTE or a fine arts credit. If you look at acting, advanced acting, or play production, our recommendation is that it is moved from comm arts or fine arts to fine arts only. And this is because these courses are not currently aligned to the Common Core state standards, and the fine arts credit better represents the content being taught within these courses. AP Art History currently is only receiving a fine arts. Our recommendation would be that it could receive a full fine arts credit or a 0.5 fine arts credit and a 0.5 social studies credit. This is due to the rigor of the history content that's included within this course. Last year, we brought business pre-calculus forward for board approval. You approved this as a semester-long course. As our teachers were in curriculum development this past school year, they did recognize the need that this would become a full year course rather than the first one semester that was originally approved under. I'm going to transition now to the 612 resources that are being recommended this evening. These resources are being recommended actually for this upcoming school year, as Mr. Bridges communicated earlier, which would be for the 2014-15 school year. This slide communicates the high school courses or high school resources that are being recommended this evening. These have been evaluated by the course teams from each building and were reviewed considering the alignment to the curriculum, the rigor of the content, the instructional design, the support for student learning, and then any additional components that these resources include. Each resource is replacing a data text that no longer aligns with the current curriculum or the rigor of the course. The next courses are the 6-8 resources that are being recommended this evening. In January, I presented the majority of the K-8 resources that will be used to support our new literacy curriculum for implementation of the next school year. At that time, our 6-8 literacy team was still working on creating extended text sets for each unit of instruction. These text sets include fiction and nonfiction short and also extended text for teachers to choose from as they plan instruction. These texts that are uploaded to board docs have been carefully chosen and evaluated by our team of teachers. Classroom teachers will then have the opportunity to work with their building teams to determine which text from the recommended text sets are appropriate for their students as they look at our new curriculum as well. The next resource is the Lucy Calkins Unit of Study for Writing. This resource was previously approved for the K-8 curriculum and is also aligned to Common Core state standards. This will provide a continuous learning of instruction for writing with our 6-8 teachers and students. The next is our health video. Our 6-8 health teachers are working collaboratively to review a new DVD, and the recommendation for the sex education video is to move from 7th grade to 8th grade under the Illinois state law. This year is new that anytime we teach abstinence, we also have to cover contraception. So the recommendation for the newly upgraded video will now move from 7th grade to 8th grade if approved. The next one are our dual language. This year, or next year, our first cohort will be entering 7th grade. So these two resources, one will be used in literacy, the other will be used in social studies, are being recommended for those students next year. That concludes our courses and also our resources, and I will open it up for any questions at this point.
Susan.
Yes.
I love the capstone class. I love the opportunity for that. I was curious if you considered expanding that into other areas because it seems so limited to just offer it to, something like that to music students. I love that you're both that all three of you are shaking your head.
At least we agree on something. The capstone, or the idea of the capstone, has come out of the 2-year curriculum audit process that we've done with our department chairs at both schools, and it's not the first one. The social studies kind of set the model with the capstone, and this is based on that idea. And it's really an opportunity for kids to have choice. We wanted it to be open to any kid with any music interest, but it's going to take them up a level in terms of what the standards are and what the expectations are. So yeah, if it fits, we're certainly wanting to emphasize that model.
I love it on so many levels. I mean, it gives them an opportunity to write about it in their essays for college and set themselves apart. I mean, there's so many beneficial parts to it. So is it open to only seniors, or would it be open to, how does that work?
Well, I think it depends on where they're at in the process and the recommendation probably of the Fine Arts Department Chair.
That's fantastic. It's exciting. It's really, every year we used to see so many classes being listed, and then, I know the course book would have a gazillion of them, and then the kids wouldn't sign up, and you'd be driving them back and forth between Central and North. Is that process still going on, or is it pared down more now?
The curriculum review process?
Yeah.
We completed the first round with each of the department chairs about this time last year. And it's an ongoing process. For English, for example, next year is the year when we'll be looking at all of our senior level options and aligning those courses to the Common Core. So back to the question of, is this something that we'll see in other content areas? I believe that we will. It may not be the same title like it is in social studies and in music, but you're going to start to see very exciting capstone opportunities for our students because of the curriculum review process
like
that's
a
happening
STEM
in
opportunity,
exactly.
something like that.
So in science and math, that collaboration, I believe, will lead us to a pretty exciting capstone course in those areas. But it's a process that we started last year, but we don't think will ever really end.
That's always reinventing yourself.
Yes.
Other questions? Donna?
So the algebra and geometry applications you said is to round out a 4-year math for special ed. Can you just, I don't know what the flow is of that.
A majority of the supported ed students, their 4-year math sequence would start with general math as a freshman, introduction to algebra applications as a sophomore, algebra applications as a junior, and then prior to this capstone opportunity, we had a course called consumer math that was the senior year option in supported ed. And what we have found is more and more of those students are going on to a community college level course, and that consumer ed course wasn't providing any opportunity for them to learn some essential geometry skills that really weren't taught in freshman, sophomore, or junior year. And so we weren't maximizing opportunity at the community college level for those students.
And I love that you've separated the discrete math and statistics, because that's something that allows more students to be able to partake in that. And yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? I just had a quick question as we went through this. The state standards, just so everybody understands, the state standards haven't changed. As you've gone through this and put things in categories or buckets of fine arts or communication arts, it's a District 203 initiative to do that. The state hasn't changed anything, correct? I didn't think they did. And one other, and somewhere else, I know I read this over the weekend, somewhere else you talk about the number of FTEs and all. I think that's in the next, I saw here we talked about general resources, but it didn't quantify the people, but I know I've seen it. Yeah, it's in the other presentation. Okay, I knew I saw it somewhere.
I still have another one too.
Sure.
Sorry. So I went through your whole list of 6th through 8th grade, the extended text, and I noticed that a lot of things that were typically freshmen are now down into the 6th and 8th. And so is that just a result of Common Core, or are we doing some duplication because to meet everyone's needs, or what's the thought behind that?
Kind of a little bit of all of that. When we went through the extended text last year at the high school, they definitely collaborated, and when they created our text list that we put in front of you last year, they had conversations with 8th grade. And so many of the overlap you're going to see in 8th grade with freshmen. And now this year, as we're giving more choice to 8th grade, or to our freshmen, when they had conversations of, is it for or project idea, is it for honor? So we really thought about what is the text for project idea, and then what would our text be for English 1 honors. So we carefully thought about that because the student would flow into that pathway. And then we looked at what's 8th grade versus what is just our English 1. So we thought about those two scenarios, but then we also said, we sometimes read text for different purpose, and how much overlap do we have? And some of the high schools said, okay, we'll give you this text because they felt it met better maybe in freshman level or in 8th grade. So we had deep conversations about the overlap.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Awesome. Again, we learn. It's kind of fun to have so much to sit here to learn, you know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will, again, for the community at large to understand, we will vote on the new high school courses for the 15-16 school year, and also the resources for 14-15 at our next meeting. High school course fees?
Okay, annually, the two high schools, in cooperation with our Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, Bob Ross, review high school course fees and then prepare a presentation of recommendations for any course fee changes to the Board of Education for your action. So tonight I'm going to ask Mr. Ross to present those recommended changes. The Board of Education will be asked for action at its March 17th meeting. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. That's precisely what I was going to say. We bring these proposed changes to you tonight. They're in board docs. We'd ask for your approval on March 17th. A couple things I'd call to your attention. Proposed changes are in bold and italics in the attachment. The majority of the changes this year result from changes in the cost of materials, such as workbooks. It's especially true in the World and Classical Languages Department. Call to your attention, there are some differences in fees between the two high schools. The high school and district administration are committed to continuing to improve the consistency of the fees between the two buildings. This proposal represents course fees that are more consistent than they ever have been. I'd like to attempt to answer any questions that I could for you.
Questions? Everyone's thinking. I have a quick question. In one of the schools, I think it was Central, there was a Business Week publication. We all understand we get publications at home, but that had a fee and then went to nothing. So would you presume they're donating it, or they're getting it online, or they're getting it a different way. I know it's a very specific question, but it's like if there's a periodical they need, you think, oh, you got to pay for that. You know?
As time passes, we review all the time whether we want to continue to use it. I can find out for you, Mrs. Romberg. It may just be we've elected not to use that resource. in that
Okay,
class.
as opposed to not having
And
a
therefore
fee.
wouldn't
No.
charge the kids,
No, don't
right.
create a project. No, I get it now. I just presumed we were getting it at it was a gift.
That wouldn't be good business.
No, but it's not our business, so they were making a pay for it. Any comments or questions? Yes.
I do have one question. For the Naperville North fees under option, this is the first one on option. It's attached. It's one of the attachments. I don't know why I clicked on, but it says optional fees and it says newspaper and it says $10 a year. We don't do a newspaper. We have online newspaper, but we don't publish a newspaper anymore.
Good to know.
Yeah.
That's why you're here.
Yeah. So
Perhaps we will next year. Let me find out from Mr. Helms exactly why that's there. And I'd like to bring that back to the board at the March 17th meeting.
Thank you,
Awesome. Thank you. And it's another. The classes are just so exciting. Not just nutrition 1, 2, culinary arts, and nutrition 3. Looks like a great class. So, well, I guess I want to go back to first grade first, and then I'll worry about this high school stuff. Right? Any other comments or questions, or collect them for next time? Thank you so much, Bob, for that. Next, certified staffing for early childhood through 8th grade.
Another annual task or project we present to the Board of Education is our projected staffing. We break it into over 2 months. This first month is going to be for EC through 8 certified staffing projections. Next month we'll come to you with projected staffing for high school. And so Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education, Kitty Ryan, and once again Bob Ross will talk to you about the recommendation for our projections.
Thanks, Mr. Bridges. The staffing plan that was included in your board documents for this evening represents the projected staffing for EC through grade 8 for the school year 14-15. As you see, overall staffing has increased 4.35 FTE, and this number reflects an increase actually to the elementary staffing offset by a decrease in junior high school staffing. The increase to elementary staffing is due to the addition of all-day kindergarten at all of our remaining elementary schools where it is not currently in place. And so that's basically the elementary end of the world. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ross.
Because we expect to have less students at the middle school level in 2014-15 than we have this year, we'll reduce our certified staff by 3 full-time equivalent positions. Actually, the number would have been 5.0, but to meet special education needs, we intend to add 2.0 FTE for special education for a net reduction of 3 positions at the middle school level.
Comments or questions? Susan?
Dan, when you bring it back with the high school included, will you do an overall count so that we have a full picture?
We can
at
do
the
that.
time? That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Comments or questions? Okay. Next topic this evening, 8.06, debt service levy.
Okay, I think Chief Financial Officer Brad Kaufman is going to move to the presentation table to walk you through a presentation in a PowerPoint, but there's some information provided for the Board of Education in board docs, including background and timeline, PowerPoint that Mr. Kaufman is going to speak to. You also see a table of some comparisons of requests that the Board of Education members had made and information that you can use in your deliberating. You also have a recommendation from me as a result of our last meeting with the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Kaufman to walk through the presentation, which concludes with our recommendation to the board.
Thank you, Superintendent Bridges. Okay, this is going to be just updating from the information that we gathered at our last meeting with Citizen Finance Advisors. Following this exact same timeline, so next meeting, if the board chooses, we would have action on abating, finally to file that with the county by March 31st. We have 2 bonds outstanding, the 2008 and 2009 issues. 4 of the last 5 you did abate. And if we did not abate this year based on a $375,000 value home, it would cost to a taxpayer to be $95. So here's what we went through the financial model with the Citizens Finance Advisors, and they made some final tweaks, which now we'll use this model to move forward on making the budget for 14-15 and any other decisions, including the debt abatement and repurchasing of bonds or anything like that. Here are their changes. They felt like that the health insurance dropped off too quickly. We had 7 and then 5 thereafter. Now they're recommending we go to 7, and then stair-stepping down 0.5% at a time to be reevaluated every year as we move forward, which we would. And then finally, the other thing is they felt like we're actually a little too optimistic on investments, and investments a pretty good number for the district, and so they looked at scaling that back by 0.25%. So we made those adjustments, and finally, no other changes. So we have finished that model. So basing on the new, what we call the new CFA base model, we are projecting, this is a projection without any abatement. If we move forward, we're through fiscal year 19, we would have about 17% cash reserve before taxes. That's based on the district mandatory policy of at least 10. As far as, the district a couple of meetings ago passed a resolution to work to repurchase bonds. The district is still in negotiations working to try to bring that forward to the board at another time. This is just a graphical representation of that. Of course, the red line is the actual June 30th year-end fund balance, and the blue line represents the cash reserve line. So then we, of course, put together a model of what would it look like if we abate for all future years. If we abated for all future years based on this model, the district would drop to 11.7% cash reserves by fiscal year 2019, just above the board policy of 10%, which is contributing for our AAA bond rating and all of that. This is a graphical representation of those scenarios, and you can see there how the cash reserves tailing off in those last years as we're using that funds. So finally, we're here tonight with a final recommendation after much deliberation and discussion. We'd recommend that we actually levy. Go ahead and levy for the 2009 and 8 bonds as authorized by the 2008 referendum, which would be $3 million. And then, as you know, debt service funds are segregated and separate. So when we abate, we actually abate out of the ed fund. So what would happen by levying? That would leave funds that would have been transferred out of the ed fund to debt service. That would leave those funds available. We would recommend we use those funds out of the ed fund to either continue to repurchase bonds or to make capital improvements to the district as identified in the master facility plan. So with that, I'd answer any questions that we might have.
Questions, comments?
So thank you, Brad, for all the updating and the time that you've spent with the Citizens Finance Committee. So the recommendation that you have on that last slide for the to levy, and then you have what the purpose of the additional funds will be used for then. So if we weren't able to repurchase the 2008 bonds, is your recommendation the same?
Yes. Well, I think here we have a two-part process.
Right.
We're still in negotiations on repurchasing those bonds, but if not, then we would look to go ahead and use those funds, the funds that are freed up, to use those to go ahead and make capital improvements to the facilities. And we did talk with Citizens Finance Advisors with this, and they concurred with this recommendation.
Right. I presented to the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee that we are in the process of finalizing a facility master plan. We don't have identified specific plans yet. We have targeted areas for improvement that have come through the Future Focus process, the input from our community. The architects have visited each of our sites. They recently had an update meeting with the members of my leadership team, and we've identified some priorities from within their work for them to do a little bit of additional work. So there are a number of things that will come forward through this plan. Again, I think the first priority would be to continue to support the purchase and cancellation of those certain bonds if possible, and if not, then we would use the money for capital improvement projects. The tone, and Mr. Yench was at the meeting too, so he could speak to this, of the Citizens Finance Committee was, so long as those dollars being collected were being used for either the purchase of the bonds or for the capital improvements, they would support the levy. They didn't want to see the levy done in a manner to simply build up our fund, but if we were going to commit to using those dollars for either of the two items specified, they would support moving forward with the levy.
So the master's facility plan is going to be presented to us approximately.
We're hoping for May for the most for an update. We again have the architects going back with based on some input they received from my administration, from my team, to do a little bit of work. We're going to have a couple follow-up meetings on a couple items that we need to go into a little bit deeper conversation about, but we would expect in May. And this would be really a long-term, so the idea that there would be $3 million worth of projects is pretty conceivable.
Would those be able to be done within the time frame between now and the next time that we have an opportunity to abate or not abate?
I would say some would be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? While you're thinking, you really look like you're contemplating. I think this is a question both for Brad and for Dan. And I think it would help the board and maybe the community that's watching this. The Finance Advisory Committee recommends to the superintendent. It's a superintendent's committee. But what I find kind of interesting, I don't sit on it as a board member anymore. There's two, it rotates. A number of these members have been on for a number of years. And it's, I guess it's interesting when you say they've come up with this recommendation, because I've certainly sat on that committee when they haven't come up with that recommendation. So this is, so anyhow, I just want to share that.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. In the 2 years where I've been superintendent, and then even in the previous year, the conversation with this group has been, exactly what you say, that this is, so, and I think the tone was simply, so long as there's a purpose for the use of these funds and these dollars, they would support our recommendation. And again, I think this it's important to stress that this is an advisory group, and they represent a very diverse set of skills and expertise in areas from accounting to risk management to law to insurance and benefits. So they bring a specific set of qualifications and experiences to the table. And as you've seen through our conversation regarding assumptions, they've really helped mold what the assumptions should be, and I think that's where their greatest value is. And then the other role that they play is reviewing our recommendation that we want to bring to the Board of Education to get their reaction based on their expertise. So it's been, I think, a thoughtful conversation. And so.
Okay, so I'm a big proponent, of course, of putting money back into facilities, making sure they're maintained properly, because that just pays dividends long term as you move forward. The more advanced maintenance you can do, the more money it's going to save you in the long run as we go. And I know it's also very hard to get your head around the fact you don't know what that program is going to be, so it's kind of a leap of faith for the board to take. We'll either abate or wait for this master facilities plan and figure out what we're going to do. But I think it's important also to Dan's goals. I mean, one of our charges to Dan was for him to look at the master facilities plan and also then put forth a plan in place or how he might do some of this work. So I think the second part of the recommendation is consistent with what we asked him to do as far as his goals and how he was going to manage the safety and security of the buildings and also long-term maintenance. So I think the recommendation is pretty good.
Couple questions. So I appreciate all the work that you did to go back to the advisory committee and talk to them a little bit about some of these questions that we had last time. Particularly, we had talked a little bit about the healthcare, so it's helpful to know their perspective in terms of trying to get that correct percentage. I remember, I think I asked you last week or 2 weeks ago, and it was highlighted to me again as we were just talking about the staffing. that was something that we're still going to continue to incorporate moving forward. You just don't have that data, is that correct?
Well, right. I mean, right now, what we're projecting is for those out years, four through, 1 through 4, is we're just projecting flat.
Right.
We'll continue to update. We're about to finish the,
that's
the
right.
planning for 14-15 staffing, so we'll make those adjustments right away.
Okay, but you
The overall enrollment capacity, the enrollment study
Yeah.
that the board had approved earlier this year is underway. The professor was recently in district gathering more information. He's completed research through, I think I'm looking at Will and DuPage counties. He's collected information from those sources.
Right. He's collected the data from there. He's in the process of doing his geocoding, and he will be having to come back and go to the Illinois Department of Human Resources to get some birth data.
Public health.
Public health, I'm sorry, yes.
And so when we get all that
So to answer your
things will be-
question, assumptions will then be modified based on new
what
data,
we hear.
new information.
Mhm.
Correct.
Right, exactly. Okay. And then I have a question about the retirements, and I know that we included those, I think you put them in last time and sent them to the advisory committee, and that was approved. And my question was, I know that that was initially a bump in spending, but that then it reflects savings. And the savings, did they begin in FY 2019, or was that FY 2020, where we start to see the difference between replacing, and I know you're replacing at Masters plus 5, but you're
Right.
replacing.
Right. So what was initially built into the model was known retirements.
Right.
And so those known retirements only went out through 2018. And so then we had discussed, well, let's look at just some average. So we built in their average of 50, which is what we've had in years past. Now, who knows what that'll hit, but so that's in there. So those are in there coming into effect on 2019. So so those are rolling off, and new other ones, new teachers will be hired in, and so that is partly reflected. But then there would be then more
Additional
in
cost
2020.
savings.
There would be
Yeah.
more cost savings
Yeah.
too. So the model does not go out far enough to encompass all of it.
But you do expect that there will be additional savings that will be realized as we move forward in FY 2020 and 21 moving
Right,
forward.
but here
Yeah.
again, I mean, once we start planning so far out, it
Yeah.
gets to be really difficult.
Of course. I'm just, for my own recollection, I just wanted
Right.
to clarify that. Okay. My other question would be also with regard to the facility plan. So I'm listening to what Terry said in terms of the difficulty of trying to estimate that. We're working to make a decision, and of course we're trying to balance all the different factors without understanding kind of what we're talking about in terms of what might be encompassed in that. But we're looking at this year only, and so it's something we can look at on an annual basis. But for purposes of this year's decisions, do we have any ideas of rough estimates or anything like that we'll be able to make the decision for this year?
No, too early in the process right now to have a dollar figure that I could give you. But as I had said, in terms of looking at the priorities that were identified for the facility master plan, and Mr. Fielden referred to some of them, differently secured entry than what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
Access in our buildings, flexible instruction that we've talked about, the impact of all-day kindergarten in some of our facilities. Is we look at 22 buildings with potential projects at each of those buildings. It's fair to say that the impact of the overall facility master plan would be above $3 million. And I think you look at the facility entries. We have secure entries now, but we're talking about a different standard of entry in our buildings, in some of our buildings. So, depending on where this lays out, and we looked at establishing a model of what we expect in our classrooms, a standard classroom for our district. So we're really looking at a number of things, and I don't have a dollar figure for the board at this time. I can work with the architects and see what range we can get to for the March 17th meeting, but I still think those would be very gross estimates as opposed to anything specific.
But it's helpful, to review some of the things that we're talking about, and all of which are priorities that we've all supported and that the board supports and that the community supported as part of Future Focus. I do also think it's noteworthy that the recommendation was different for the Citizens Advisory Committee. I went back and pulled last year's documentation from the Advisory Committee just to see, and was, because I, coming into the board as a new member, quite complimentary of the fact that we've been able to really, give back the resources that are unnecessary and, lift a little burden off the taxpayer. And that's been fantastic that's been able to be done 4 out of the past 5 years. And so I went back and looked, and I know the burden is cumulative for taxpayers. So, there was some discussion last year in the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee documents about the impact of the 3% and how, that was difficult for people. And then there was the full abatement, which helped to take that burden off. So, I know we looked at a 3% last year, and we've got a 1.7% tax increase this year. So the burden does accumulate, and it's, I think, has been something that I'm sure our community has appreciated, to be able to, have the additional funds in their pockets, for the, just given the cost that they all have. I know our community, however, really does support the work of our schools and the evidence of the good job that we're doing.
Yeah. And I think the desired and preferred use of the money would be for the payoff of the bonds, which ultimately represents a significant savings to our taxpayers.
Which is a permanent
savings to our
permanent
taxpayers.
abatement for them, for those funds.
Yeah.
Right. I think
and we
that's
certainly all support that, right?
Right, absolutely. I think that's a very key point. The reason the shift in their attitude is because of the presenting of the opportunity to really do a permanent $15 million abatement on the bonds, eliminating our debt by 28%. It's really like, paying off your home mortgage substantially early. And so in the long run, it will save the taxpayers, a large sum.
Right, and to that point, Brad, it's market conditions that are going to allow that debt to be repaid, that debt to be retired. That's the word I'm thinking about, retired. Get that debt retired. It might not happen, if it doesn't happen in 60 days, it can happen in 180 days. And you don't want to miss that opportunity. That's a key opportunity and that's the best use of those resources for the community. Our judicial, our
And I certainly support that. I'm just, it's always a balance to make sure that we are taking what we need and using what we need, and if we don't need it, keep letting people who need it also keep it in their pocket. And I think it's a balance. And I also appreciate the additional data about the 50%. That was helpful just to know, if we were to abate 50%, if we were to look at, doing something a little bit different. So thank you for that as well.
Okay, so I don't need you to answer this now, but for next time when we're in action, we said it was twofold as far as repurchasing the bonds or capital improvements, but not to be put into our fund and just to bump the reserve. At what point do we make a decision that the bonds are not going to be, or will not be able to be purchased, and then we can spend that money for capital improvements? There's got to be like a time frame of, okay, well, we've tried to repurchase the bonds back, and now we're past whatever point that is to be able to use the money for capital. Like that's what I'd like to understand. I know that may not be able to something that you can answer right now, but at least for next time, I'd like to have that.
You bet. We'll have that.
Thanks so much, Brad.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now we're getting back to our policy. This isn't even one of our, this is a new policy.
So now we get into policy, and I'll begin just with the overview of process, although the first policy we're going to review sits outside of that because it's a result of new legislation that we have to have this in place. We theoretically have this in place, at least by practice already, and what we're doing at our schools. This is to memorialize it and formalize it into policy. As we get into item 8.08 and on, this is a result of the board's decision beginning in the 2011-2012 school year to work with the Illinois Association of School Boards Policy Consultants to update and revise policy to ensure that all policies are in line with current legislation, current law, current requirements. And so last month we brought forward to you all of Section 1. This board meeting we're bringing to you many items within Section 2, but not all of Section 2. So as you think about the questions you've had about this, these are the ones we determined to be the least significant changes. So we have other policies within 2 that have more changes. As we look ahead, and I'm going to turn this over to Kane in just a minute, 8.08 are very minor changes, so we lumped those several policies together. There really was no change to the policy, only change in some wording. The rest represent some changes into the policy. Most of the policy is a result of recommended policy by IASB in terms of model policy. There's always the opportunity for customization of a policy at the local level. Your decision and conversation is what works for this board in this community, and so the feedback we take from you, Kane will go back, work with legal counsel to review and get a recommendation from legal counsel on what the customization does to the policy. So the majority of what you're going to see here comes either from input that has gone to IASB, but most of it is a result of recommendation from IASB to us. The first policy, though, is 8.07 is regarding student-athlete concussions and head injuries. So we'll start there, and then I'll let Kane walk us through the rest of the policies, and we'll have conversation on each.
May I just ask a clarifying question? Where does our attorney review come in this process? Is it before we see them, Kane, or is it? Or
We consult with IASB on this. If we have questions, then we refer it to our attorney if there's some lack of clarity or something that we're concerned about with legal process.
But
IASB has its own attorneys
Right.
on staff that consult on these policies before they're put forward.
Right, and I'm not trying to complicate the efforts here, but other policies that we've seen over the years,
Yeah.
I guess I
So
asked my
some of our
colleagues.
policies, so some of this was before Kane joined us, though. So some of the policies were identified through conversation that we thought there was substantial change. We had reviewed by our counsel. Okay.
And we're not
Correct.
changing that procedure.
Correct.
These
And
are-
so as we move forward policy by policy, when we have a set policy book in place, those will always be reviewed by our legal counsel. So what we'll do tonight is if the board has a recommendation for customization, we'll present it to IASB's policy consultant, who is an attorney, but then also to our own counsel for their review as well.
All right, so the first one, 7305, as was mentioned, is outside of the process. But it actually came up because we're, like other districts, going to be having an ROE audit later in the year. And in going through that process, discovered that this was a policy we did not yet have in place regarding concussions for student athletes. However, in going through that process related to the audit, we discovered we were actually engaging in the proper practices that are aligned with IHSA and following and even citing IHSA policy in our practice with student athletes. So this is really, as Dan said, just to memorialize that practice and align it with the IASB recommended policy, which ultimately aligns us right back with IHSA.
So we had, I had an experience this year with an athlete who had a concussion. My daughter got a concussion and had an experience, which was a very good experience. There is something missing from this policy, and I realize that this is a state policy, which is there are significant academic impacts for students who are dealing with concussion, and this policy doesn't address how they will be in school. I mean, we had a lot of really good coordination with most of her teachers, but not all, and a sense that wasn't a uniform practice in the school. Now, maybe that was just our experience. I don't know if everybody's experience, and I'm always reluctant to use my own experiences as an example. But I do think, knowing and having talked to professionals about this, that there are academic impacts that I was looking at other policies that other districts have just adopted it as is. What is our thinking about adding on to it to incorporate into our policy how a student athlete with a concussion will be treated academically? They shouldn't be taking tests. I mean, according to the professionals, they shouldn't be assessed. They
I'd
can't
want
be
to go through a
assessed.
cross-reference on other policy to see how that may be covered under other policy regarding illness or homeschool requirements or other things. My assumption would be that should be covered through policy in other places already.
It isn't really.
But we'll go through and we'll run a cross-check.
I looked at it,
to
yeah.
bring back to you, and we'll have our
I do think, but like concussion, because we do deal with
council
injured
review.
athletes, like concussion, it is different. You know, their ability to participate, the duration can be very different.
Yeah.
Girls, for example, tend to have more severe reactions to it than boys. They don't know
That's true.
why. They can't. They you know, how do you assess them? For how long? How do we determine that? So it is different than just an illness
or an injury, because they can walk around looking fine, which I think is the challenge for educators. You look fine, you seem like you're in a good mood. Why am I not able to give you a test? So
It is a medical condition, though, and you're absolutely right. The things that you cite about the different responses that individuals, particularly by gender, have with concussion. But it is a medical condition, and I would first look to existing policy, see if it is appropriately applied in these situations. Could be through procedure that goes with policy that's in place. We would do that and also consult other districts and see what they're doing regarding the concussion policy and transitioning students with concussions back into the classroom in a full-time manner, so to speak. But I will come back with feedback related to that specific question.
Well, I think the other thing to keep in mind is that we want to, 7305 is proposed to deal with student athletes. So we want to be ensure that anything that we're looking at is consistent for all students who may have such symptoms, and that's where it'll be important to look through. I see this as specific for student athletes, so we'll have to look through other cross-reference. Be interested in, if offline, you could refer Kane to other policy that you became aware of at other districts, and then we can look at how.
there's not a lot out there that other districts have because, and this is one of those instances where the research is far ahead of policy. So what they're learning about, which they learn weekly, about head injuries and the developing brain, and I understand that it's not possible to stay right on top of that. I would like us to see, I certainly can find out what other existing out there, but not much. Most everybody has just adopted the Illinois policy, the ISB policy, and not added to it so much.
And it could be a procedural or a practice matter as much or more than a policy matter per se. But you're absolutely right that the issue should be addressed in how we approach students who have concussions.
Thank you.
So I think that our high schools are doing a pre-screening for students so that they can differentiate between if
That's
they've
correct.
suffered from a concussion.
Sport.
Well, it's for student athletes. Oh yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's not reflected in the policy at all. Is there? I think it's what they're
It's
doing.
consistent with IHSA to have a pre-screening to establish a baseline.
It is consistent.
Yes, I'll double
but it's
check
not part
and
of our
get that.
policy.
No, that would be a
Okay.
practice. The policy
Okay.
refers us to be aligned with
Okay.
IHSA. I will make sure I come back with the details, though.
Two questions. One of them is, it says licensed to practice medicine in all its branches. What does that mean?
I'll have to.
I was
see.
just wondering because
I'm,
I know
I'm
that,
assuming maybe an osteopath as opposed to just an MD, but I don't know. the
Okay, because
exact
I know
answer.
some people prefer alternative medicine or things like that, and I didn't know how that played in there. Yeah, and then the other thing was, can it be included in here, or what do you think about including in here somehow? And the bylaws of the Illinois High School Association and all other clubs and teams or something like that, so that we include all kids that play and wear either a Naperville North or Naperville Central jerseys.
Okay.
Something like that. Thank you.
We'll have to get counsel on that.
That's
Yep.
perfect. Yeah. Just to look at it. Thank you. Other question, sorry. Okay, so I'm looking at number 1, as far as them returning back to practice or back to the contest or practice, I'm assuming as well. Yep. So if they're pulled out, if I understand this correctly, if they're pulled out in the middle of a contest, they can be evaluated by either a doctor or the athletic trainer and returned back.
That's correct.
But if they're not returned back to that contest, then it says that it has to be clearance from a doctor or a certified trainer in conjunction with a physical license to practice medicine in all its branches. So our athletic trainers that are on staff at the schools, are they considered in conjunction with physician, or do they have to have a note from a doctor?
Could you just clarify where you're reading from? Which one? 'Cause
1C, I'm sorry.
Okay, 1C.
I guess I don't understand.
Or a working in conjunction.
If our
yeah.
certified trainers can clear them to come back, or
No.
if,
No.
no.
They have to be working with a physician. Now, I'll have to look into what our exact practice is.
Okay.
But they cannot do it strictly on their own.
Okay.
In those situations.
Okay.
That's smart. Yeah, something. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in conjunction.
Any other comments, questions?
Okay, thank you for the feedback. We'll try to bring answers back to you regarding those questions at the next meeting. As Superintendent Bridges mentioned, in 808, it's a package of policy revisions through IASB that we, through review, estimated are not substantial in any way. They're not typos, but word usage issues, reference issues, policy reference issues, statutory reference issues, and the like. So I will answer any questions you have about those.
I think we'll do these in groups, just like they're on the agenda. We don't, if everyone doesn't mind. So if in this group, sorry, let me click back. In this group of 8.0, I'm sorry, we're going to do this in groups. So in 8.08 that Kane's just described to us, are there any questions in the items that are in in the policies that are set forth in 8.08?
Well,
Go ahead.
My only question is that question I had for you earlier: the use of the word school board versus the use of the word board of education, because it seems like we have some that say school board at the top, and then some that say board of education at the top, and then in some of the ones that we say school board, we're changing it to board of education within the policy. And so I just was wondering, is there a difference between
I've
those
put in a
two?
question to
Okay.
our consultant at IASB, but predominantly the proposed policies are changing to Board of Education. So on the whole, but for those
So I just didn't-
exceptions, I'm not aware of anything that any exceptions signify, but I've got a question into our consultant to find out.
Well, I just wondered if we needed to change, like, for example, on that very first one, it says board member term of office, and it says above it school board. Does it need to be changed to say board of ed, since we're changing it to board of ed? And have we done all the
IASB did
conforming?
not recommend that.
Huh.
So.
Okay. Like weird.
Okay, so any comments, thank you, Kristen, any comments in the grouping of 8.08? And then again, if you have other questions, you come up with them the next 2 weeks before we vote on these on the 17th. Welcome to ask staff. Oh, I'm new in town. Okay, we'll move on to 8.09. King?
Okay, this one is regarding school board governance. It just outlines the definition of what the school board to a certain degree, its makeup, its authority, and so forth.
Okay. Comments, questions on 8.09 on the agenda? And let's move on to 8.10.
This is, again, on school board I'm sorry, let me go ahead. I'm not reading the right one.
Elections.
School district elections.
I just can't.
This redefines some things, as you can see in number 1 on this policy, and number 2. There was a question from one board member about the additional language in number 2 and whether or not the wording there is correct when identifying who can sit on the electoral board from the school board. And we're going to look to possibly revise that language, because in the last sentence there you can say it says he or she is replaced on the electoral board by the school member with the second longest continuous service. That could create some confusion. We'll look to clarify that particular
Oh,
language.
because there could be a few with.
Yes, second longest. That is
Oh,
not
so
as
you have to
clear
say
as
tallest,
next
shortest,
most
yeah.
continuous service.
Right,
Might
right,
be better, but we're going to
Got it.
clarify it and just make sure it makes sense to
Okay.
everybody involved.
That's good. Next, 8.11.
This one, 240, is simply about board member qualifications. And there was a question that was asked about where in policy does it identify conflict of interest and who can and cannot work for the board or be a board member if they have financial or business interest before the board. And that's in 2100, which is actually in the group of policies that you've already gone through, and that's grouped together because there were no substantial revisions to that. Otherwise, this simply identifies school board member qualifications, or I should say Board of Education member qualifications.
Did that person, whoever asked the question, I don't want to call the person out, I don't know who it was, did your question get answered then? Because it doesn't say it's material, whatever, significant influence, or I read this
Yeah.
somewhere along the line. Okay, sounds good. Sure, you're on 8.11, just so we don't get all.
Yeah.
8.11 question. So on policy number.
Policy 240.
240, yeah.
Sorry, you're not back on the agenda
Little
page. I
confusing.
know.
Down in the red, where it says the board will annually appoint 2 student members, 1 from each high school.
Right.
We have the bridge, and I just was afraid that it would, if that was ever an issue or something like that. It just wasn't very specific on how it defines, because,
1 from each high school.
yeah, it wasn't as clear as I hoped it would be.
We can specify 1 from Central, 1
Sure.
from North.
I just,
Yeah. Fine.
But the way it is now, doesn't it make it more inclusionary? 1 from each high school? I mean,
Well, it says 2 student members
2 students,
and then
right,
1 from
right.
each high school.
Or just say, appoint student members, strike the word 2, and then if the bridge ever had an interest in having somebody.
that's fine. I
Right?
just wanted
Well, I
to,
don't know, whatever
I
you
wanted a
decide.
recommendation, I guess, on it more than anything.
Okay.
So that's fine.
Kane, it's in your able hands.
Okay. I'm not clear on the, I guess I'll have to ask for clarification. I'm not clear on the direction you're asking for here.
Do you want to be more inclusive?
I guess, yeah, the question is,
It doesn't, well, whatever we want to do is what we should do, but if it's 2, we're not thinking that.
you're looking for clarity on what our recommendation is to the board,
Yes.
and we'll
Right.
make sure it's clear on March 17th.
Perfect.
But just to, when the bridge would come in to present, sometimes students would come, and a question came up a number of years ago, would it ever make sense to have a student ambassador from a non-traditional program, for instance? I don't know. They're not, perhaps it doesn't make sense because they're not in them for enough time to represent that building versus another building. So I thought that's really what you meant by that we had talked about.
I'll discuss with staff and we'll bring our
Yeah,
recommendation on 17th.
we'll bring a more
Perfect.
specific
Perfect.
language to that.
Okay, let me get back.
Okay, the next one is, I'm sorry.
Are we at filling vacancies?
We're at 812, which is policy 270, school board member expenses.
Filling, okay, I thought it was filling vacancies.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Yep. I'm sorry, it's 270 is filling vacancies.
Right.
And you
I
can
would
see
be living.
the revisions here for process that the school board would go through in filling vacancies on the board.
Questions or comments on this one? Filling vacancies? I think it takes 100 hours if you do it. Susan Karate figured it out, right? Okay, next one, 8.13, and that's the expenses that Kim was alluding
Yes,
to?
that's the expenses, policy 2125. It does have some additions for what can be reimbursed, including the mandatory training that board members have to go through.
Okay.
Okay.
Next one.
814 is policy 2140 related to communications to and from the board. I believe there was a question about whether or not the language regarding email and what can and cannot be in it was specific enough. We go ahead and, my recommendation is to stick with the ISB recommended policy here because it specifies a direction for communications when seeking input or information from administration, and then also about communications between board members electronically. We go with their recommendation because to be too much more restrictive might cut possibilities off that we haven't foreseen at this point.
Right, and exercise judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Kristen?
I just wanted to comment on the first sentence, the Board of Education welcomes communications from the community. I thought that was a very nice sentence. Did you put that in, or was that from ISB?
That was from what ISB?
I really like that tone. It was a nice way to, that was a new...
Inclusive, right.
It was very nice to just, as opposed to just staff members should submit. I thought that was a nice tone, that we do welcome that.
Okay.
Okay, next is 815, which is policy 2210.
Now, you're getting our
No, I
attention,
have
or
the
there's a
bug.
gnat?
I'm so sorry, it's a bug.
Oh. I didn't think there could be any bugs. It's too
It
cold.
was a big one.
It's not going to kill you.
I know it's not going to kill me, but I don't want it on the computer.
On 2210, there was a question about the inclusion of Passover in this. I believe that this was language is put here.
It was before.
Yeah, it was there before, to simply clarify that in certain years, the election could be on a different date than is normally specified due to Passover, and the board should be aware of that when they're planning the appropriate actions that they need to take.
Okay.
Okay, 816 is policy 220,
Right.
And it's school board meeting procedure.
There are a couple questions on this one, or any questions?
Yes. I believe there are questions about the language about submitting suggested agenda items.
Right. So the question, Kane, that is, and please, my colleagues weigh in. The question was, originally any board member could submit an item to have as an agenda item. And now it's asking, if I remember reading this, a board member could add something as an agenda item. Now, a board member could present as a suggested item to the board president and vice president for consideration on an upcoming agenda, which I'll let people weigh in wherever they want to on that. So this was IASB.
Yeah, ISB struck that language that said items submitted by board members to the superintendent or the president shall be placed on the agenda, and recommended the language any board member may submit suggested agenda items to the board president and vice president for their consideration for an upcoming meeting. So those are
Michael?
the distinctions.
I'd have to say that is one change that I strongly disagree with, and for two reasons. First of all, having had the opportunity to sit in many workshops and roundtables with districts around the state, the districts that use this run into a lot of problems. And what it does is, if you have a disagreement between the board president and even the majority of the board, that stuff can be delayed. And basically, which is the second part, I think it goes against the philosophy that we've really cultivated here in this board, of that the president and the vice president are equal board members. They don't have any superpowers. They just happen to have a lot more meetings. But other than that, I mean, it's been rarely used, and if a board member were to abuse it, it would become obvious. I don't know that it's ever been abused. And I just hate to leave that stigma, that impression that the board president and the vice president have somehow veto authority over the agenda over other board members. I guess that's my 2 cents.
And I, again, as we always talk about, I am fully in support of that. I like the way it was written originally, and the reason, it's not about this board and how this board functions. It's about the board in 100 years or the board in 20 years, and you might not have the collaboration and the respect and of each other that we have now. So I thought that is a richness that we would lose. So
Our policies are really supposed to reflect our values. And I think that wording that doesn't reflect our values shouldn't be included.
Right.
But
Well, that's why we're going through this process.
Yeah,
Exactly.
if there's a statewide change to it, that's fine. It's not a legal issue, it's a value issue.
Right.
No, the board, absolutely, you're absolutely correct.
So I think on this one, on the second paragraph, if we can all look at it, I think we just want to go back to our old.
We'll look to reinstate the existing language
Right.
and make sure that all the other language in that policy is consistent with what that
Well,
language
and
indicates.
I guess my point would be, if this is updated wording, that's great, but it can stay.
Yeah.
Any board member should be able to
Absolutely.
speak and get something on an agenda. Awesome.
We'll make sure that it's consistent
Great.
with those wishes. There was one other question on the second page of that policy. After the enumerated items, The existing language says that the minutes shall be submitted to the board for approval or modification at its next regularly scheduled open meeting. And then what's been added through the recommendation is minutes for open meetings must be approved within 30 days after the meeting or at the second subsequent regular meeting, whichever is later. And so there was some confusion, and I have sent a question to our consultant to get some clarification on that. My quick cursory reading is that the first sentence indicates when minutes shall be submitted, and the other one is when they must be approved by. But I have sent a question in him to get some clarification before the March 17th meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good. Okay. Okey-doke. 8.17, which is Board Policy 2.230.
Correct. And this is simply about public participation at Board of Education meetings and petitions to the board. It simply clarifies some things. It takes out some things that aren't really necessary in light of how the board governance structure is already consisted. Let me just take a moment here, please. And otherwise, these are issues of tone and policy reference too.
So we always ask under number 2, please identify yourself and state your address. Should that, I know they don't have to, because somebody might feel like if they're talking about something controversial that somebody might be retaliatory if they had the address on there. So, but it's what we do. That's our common practice. And if that's what we ask, should that be reflected in our?
Or I guess the question is now, why do we ask it if it's not part of our policy?
Should it either be reflected in our policy or should we stop asking it? That's either way. It's like you said, it should reflect our values and what we do and what we practice. So, what are your thoughts?
Does anybody know how it started where we did the name and address?
I think it was to demonstrate that the speaker, whether they
resident?
were from inside or
Resident,
outside the
yeah.
district.
I guess it's, you know what, it's, I'm just,
to know that the person's a resident of the community.
versus it being some anonymous person that just comes. You have to state your name, right? So,
I could agree with you on the address part, but certainly they should identify themselves as at least a resident.
They need to be identified for purpose of the record.
Right.
So,
or if you're going to try to respond to them, how do you ask someone that you might want to respond to their address, but somebody else that you're thinking, well, there's not it's almost a rhetorical comment. You wouldn't ask their address. So I guess as I'm thinking
we
through
can
it,
see counsel on inclusive language
name and
about
address.
name and address. Be more specific
I
about the
think
identification.
I
The
would
city
like
does it. The Park District
Right.
does it.
They all
It could also be the
But I
point
think
of
we can add it to-
verification and not misrepresenting oneself.
Yeah.
Potentially.
right, and add it to our policy, and then we have that to go back on that as part of our policy.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay, the last one we have.
Oh, Kristen, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Too busy
I
reading.
apologize.
That's okay. I just had one question. So I just was wondering about that tone, which I really liked about the public emails, and if we wanted to add something, for example, at each regular and special open meeting, the board welcomes public comment or welcomes the comments of members of the public and school district employees for comments or questions subject to reasonable constraints. This is a question because I thought that tone was so nice in the.
I just think you want to avoid being repetitive in the policy too.
Well, this is a different policy because it's the public participation.
Within the policy book, the policy manual, the encouragement for the public participation is within our policy. So I guess that would be my opinion, that it's already reflected in our policy manual in the other policy.
Kristen, you're speaking about it in which policy?
Well, it was the new sentence that we added.
No, I
was
totally
the
understand. Which I'm just
communications.
asking you. Do you remember which one it was? Just so we can.
The communications to and from the public.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm on this one. This 2230.
Right. Communications to public, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's in that one.
2140.
So we had added that sentence there about welcoming their emails and their communications, and so
Right.
then I was just wondering if.
So what are you trying to have it say?
Oh, I just asked if we would want to add something similar in this provision where it just says, right, this is a lot more similar to the tone that our previous policy was in the communications. Just like if you want to contact, do this. And it's a question of at each regular and special open meeting, the Board of Education welcomes members of the public and school district employees to comment or ask questions subject to reasonable constraints.
So I guess the question is really, are we keeping, that was an IASB recommendation. Are we keeping with general IASB, or are we going, unless it isn't
Yeah.
part of our values?
Totally.
Or it never ends? Do you know what I mean? I appreciate, I guess you guys have to answer.
I do think, I understand what Dan is saying. I think, certainly you can never be too welcoming. Also, people don't read the whole manual. They'll go look at that policy as it applies to a question they may have. So they're not going to read through an entire section. They're going to see what is the policy and speaking to them in as much as anybody but us goes and looks at
If we were to
these.
include something, what I would recommend is just adding the same sentence at the beginning.
Yeah.
The Board of Education welcomes public participation in its meetings,
session meetings.
and then move in.
Yeah, that's a nice.
Yeah.
I think if somebody's going to decide whether they're going to come speak to the board, what is the policy on speaking, and they see that, it's it's just a nice Midwestern.
It is.
Welcoming, right?
Welcoming, right?
Okay.
I will come back with that then, definitely.
Last one?
The last one before us
Policy development.
is 818 is policy 2240. This is about board policy development. I'm just going to take a moment here to make sure I'm clear on the distinctions, because I've been looking at a lot of policy too. Really, the one strikeout to be aware of is Board Policy Committee will consider all policy suggestions and provide information and recommendations to the board. They
we don't have a
recommend we
policy
strike
committee.
that.
We don't have a standing policy committee.
Correct.
So
Okay,
that's
yeah,
a
right,
good
right.
recommendation, right?
Mm-hmm.
They ran out of wording.
Sure. Susan, did you work on all these? Did you?
This is subsequent to that, so we went through that. This is part of the contract we have to review
Got it.
them and update them legally, so this is since then.
Okay.
I'm
I
not
was going to thank you,
responsible.
but.
Are you happy with them? I should have said, do you like them?
She deserves
Yes,
a thanks.
I
She
did.
did sit and go through. Yep.
Some exciting material, right?
Pat on the back, okay? Atta girl.
Are they good?
Yeah, they're good.
So if I can just summarize real quick before
Michael,
moving.
Michael,
I'm
hold
sorry.
Because I was looking for it before when we went through 220, and because it wasn't highlighted, couldn't find it right away. So going back to 220, 8.16 on the agenda, and I just read it to you because it's more of a question, why is this even in here? And do we do it? Those are my two questions. The board's meeting minutes must be submitted to the board's treasurer. Original language said on the first Monday of April and October, and at other times as the treasurer may require. And the recommendation is to the board's treasurer as such times as the treasurer may require. Why is that in there? And do we do it? And what does the treasurer do with it? Because it doesn't say he should review it. It's just supposed to, he's like supposed to.
They
look
have
at
bigger rooms to
There-
store the
There are a
material.
lot of questions there.
Right. Electronics.
So there are a lot of questions there. So I would say mostly I don't know. I can find out a little bit of background.
'Cause I
Two,
hate
we
to
do
have-
have a
What I
treasurer.
can say is this: our board treasurer is sitting right there, and Ann does not walk down and bring minutes to him on the dates that are specified in
Well,
policy.
I guess the biggest so first of all, we don't do it. But second of all, why the heck is it in there? Because it doesn't even give him any duties with it.
Well, I thought someone explained to me that sometimes treasurers
Right,
are
and that's-
outside your organization.
This is again model policy recommendation. Some boards appoint a treasurer who is outside of their staff.
Understood.
Right.
But the
For us, it's
minutes,
not true.
the minutes
That's
are part of the
correct.
public record anyway.
You're right. Yeah,
I
so
will-
He has a call in, and we're getting.
Yeah.
Okay,
we're
I'm just
some
getting you
clarification.
some
We
feedback.
It's
can't-
a minor point. I was just reading through this. I'm going, what the heck is this?
Preliminary research, believe it or not, indicates that based on when boards take actions that have monetary consequences, that have budgets attached to them, they have to do it in a certain way, and it could be that treasurers have to read minutes in order to identify that that's been done
Now
in order for them to
you
execute.
must have gone to District 203 school.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a good-
So,
that's
but
a
I'm
good
going to
point,
find
though.
out specifically from our consultant, but I think that's part of the answer.
But it doesn't say that.
Okay,
It-
okay.
All
I think,
right.
ask
It
Nancy.
doesn't
Okay,
say
doke.
that, no.
Hey, I'm
Thank you,
sorry.
Ken.
I didn't say that much this meeting. Come on. Can't get my questions answered? God.
Now, the board president said no.
I did not. Okay. Okay, doke. So, if,
Okay, so for summary, just in Kane, you can check here.
Yep.
So we have some questions for clarification or requests for more information on 7305, that's the concussion policy.
Correct.
And then policy numbers 2.40, 2.220, and 2.230.
Correct. That's what I have in my notes also.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you covered 2.240.
We have
Has got the questions
2.4, 2.220, and
Got it. Sorry.
2.230.
Correct.
I was two off. Thanks. Okey doke, and we will look at those with the anticipation of voting on them on 3/17. Awesome. Thank you, King.
Anticipation is just the word I use when I think about this policy section, too.
Yeah. Awesome.
Look at
So our
that.
next item, our upcoming events. And we're getting into that, oh my goodness, that last trimester of the year. It's frightening. If I can ask the board members if they would be willing to let me know. I know where certain people want to be at graduation, but if you can let me know if you have a preference in the next day or so or whenever, that'd be great. And also if you're flexible. But I do know where Mr. Fielden and Mrs. Karate will be. They will be with their children. Mrs. Karate, Mr. Karate will be there too. And
I do have one more item to add to the agenda. You'll be getting an invitation soon, but I think we've advised you previously. But upcoming is a reminder in April, and if I can just have this document open, April 11th, Friday, April 11th, Lincoln Junior High School will be having a community party to celebrate 50th anniversary of Lincoln Junior High School. The board will be invited. So we'll pass along that information to you again this week, so that if you're able to attend, you could attend.
there's April 11th, right?
Correct. 5 to 8.
Awesome. Yes.
I think we need to put the board meetings on the June. I don't know why I was looking at it, and it doesn't have the board meetings on the June, but it has for all the other months.
Do we just go through June?
I don't know.
Yeah, we just go through our fiscal year. Yeah, that's a good idea. We have to put our board
We
meetings
have the
on
other
there.
June events, but not the board.
Well, they don't have all the June.
The
events,
June
right?
meetings.
The June meetings aren't on there, because we do our whole fiscal year. So add the June meetings, if you would, please, Ann, and also if we can add it to the schedule of the Lincoln celebration as well as an Evite. I've gotten so dependent on those Evites. Okey doke. That brings us to the end of our meeting, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Great, we have a motion.
Second.
And a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'll be back. I'll be back. I think that's a biological break. I'll be back.